I have down any number of issues during your chief accountanship. If someone wanted to find a very quick synopsis of them, the piece that Steve Zeff wrote that included 14 who made a difference in the May issue of the 1987 Journal of Accounts, he gives a snapshot of your contributions, and there are some things that maybe stand out. My notes caught up. When I had written you earlier, I said there were going to be, I had gone through your collected writings and had noted actually more than 2 or 3, I think I have 5 or 6 down here, but the one that always catches my attention, and the one I assign to students to read up to this day, is your piece on the independent accountant of the SEC. It was written in 1959. It has to do really with the controversy that goes on, I think, perpetually about how the independent public accountant resolves the matter of responsibility to the client, to the public, and regulates the relationship with a regulatory body such as the SEC. And about the time, I guess, this paper was written, the Institute and the SEC were quite a bit apart in their views on independence, in the sense that the Institute and the profession may have been advancing a notion of, as they have, I think, fairly consistently, that independence is a state of mind, and therefore it's an individual issue, whereas over time the Commission has always focused on relationships as evidence of actions that might suggest a state of mind. But particularly, I think there was an Illinois episode here. The Illinois Society of CPAs had adopted an independence rule that I think was being proposed maybe and ultimately was adopted as a model for what the Institute changed to about this time.
I just don't remember
the particulars.
I don't remember that at all. I'll give you a little example, though, on independence.
Okay.
This was when we were at 425 2nd Street. And one day, a gentleman came in the front door and spoke to Miss Mary Margaret Glorious. How'd you like that for a name?
Mary Margaret Glorious.
Well, she was a very good secretary. She used to claim that she was just like a CPA, so she had some kind of semblance of, she did certain things and studied to be an office secretary. Well, anyway, she was good, but she was kind of hard on some people. Well, this fellow walked in and asked Margaret if I was in, and could I be available to a little conversation. So I told her to bring him in. So he outlined a little problem he had. His father-in-law was running a business that was going to the point where he ought to consider registration with the SEC. Now, the question comes to me, could he do that? I said, no, you can't do that. It wasn't a very long conversation. And his response to that turned down was, thank you very much. Well, he recognized he was not independent. His wife and his father-in-law after him, a new company, going public. No, he was dead right.
So
he sought my help to get along with his family.
And that's not unlike some of the arguments that when you have a client problem, it's nice to have someone with a stick behind you saying, "You've been right all along." Atlantic Research Corporation, that's a name that I came across in I again remember a conversation with you back at the University Club many years ago about Atlantic Research Corporation, about 1964.
That was a celebrated affair in Virginia, and here's where I'm beginning to lose memory of names.
Okay.
But there was an engineer who was the head of that outfit, and he thought he knew more about accounting and finance than all the exchanges in the world and all the chief accountants in the world. So we had a little trouble with him. I don't think I should go any farther.
Okay. But the issue really dealt with the difference between measuring and reporting income for the annual report to shareholders versus the way in which you followed and reported net income, for example, in a 10K filing. It was possible under those circumstances to have a different net income figure for the annual report as opposed to the 10K. That was related to the argument, wasn't it?
Well, to some extent, yes. I tried to hit off a lot of that. It was a problem. In fact, John Cooley mentioned his interest in bad accounting and the ignorance of people who use accounting statements and so forth. That was one of the problems, and I was interested in that subject from my Yale days. I tried to get the students who were members of factory-owned company to get their fathers or whoever's the relationship to give them a copy of their financial statements, take to the class and show the professor. Well, there's one man said, "Indeed not, you're not going to do that." There's people blasted all over the world. Had no confidence in professors at all. They're still instructors.
Well, the Atlantic Research, I guess, was written up in Barron's. And,
oh yes, it was widely broadcast. What was going on there.
And as I recall, the resolution was that eventually, by tightening up various issues, we got to the point where the net income on the annual report to shareholders and the net income in the 10K have to be the same. In other words, you really can't put your financial statements cast in one light for the commission filing and then cast them in, let's just say, a little more glowing light for the annual report to shareholders.
One thing that I dwelled on quite a little was this business of condensing the statements up in front, in the president's letter or someplace like that. Mm-hmm. And often you'll find that is blown into something very important. The financial statements in the rear are just some accounting stuff.
Yeah. People tend to read the slicker presentation up front.
That's why they do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing I kind of privately campaigned against when I talked to anybody who was guilty of doing what I'm going to describe, I've noticed over the years that the annual report of corporations is getting to be an artist's job, and not an account.